do we correct this? The way we correct it is one soul at a time. And we talk about it. And we're honest. And we're open about it. Okay? And because if we don't talk about it, then it still goes untalked about, still goes unnoticed. Nobody ever deals with it. And then it only becomes an issue when your child gets AIDS. Or when your husband gets AIDS. Or when your child gets cervical cancer because they contracted HPV. Then we want to talk about it. But we cannot wait to talk about it then. And we cannot wait to talk about it in a forum, on a political platform. No, we can't wait. We have to talk about it in the kingdom because nobody else knows the answer because God invented sex. All right. And so on next week, we're going to talk about how do we reverse this cycle that we're in. We're going to talk about how do I overcome, because I'm talking about this stuff and there are people in this room right now dealing with the same stuff I've been talking about. There are people who may view this video who are dealing with the same thing that I'm talking about, and you just want to know, how do I get free? Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that, about how you get free from these bondages, this sexual deviancy. Matter of fact, probably later on in the year, I was tweeting some of those statistics on Twitter, and I talked about how a great number of women with HIV contracted from their husbands. And this one lady responded, and she wasn't even one of my friends, she just saw it out there. She responded, she said, yes, the truth hurts, but that's how I got it from my husband. And she said that she and her husband are still married. She still loves him. She said that he just made a mistake. And now it's not about morality. It's about the infection and us living with it. Okay? And so I'm going to see if I can get she and her husband, because she says she and her husband goes about and they talk about it. And they deal with it. Because maybe they can stop some other marriage from experiencing it. Okay? And so I think I'm going to get her to come and talk about that with us. And just talk about her experiences. Because we need to deal with this. And I said it last week, if you, I believe that we need to get tested. We need to get tested. Because it takes the HIV infection 5 to 10 years to show up in the bloodstream. Okay? Because in the beginning, your T cells are fighting the virus off. But then that cell, that HIV infection begins to morph and begins to mutate, and it begins to look just like a T cell, and so the other cells begin to let that virus in the body. And that's how you begin to contract it. That's how it begins to affect your body, because your body is not able to fight this virus off anymore, because it has deceived your cells into thinking that it is a safe cell. And so it may take 5 to 10 years for that to show up in your body, because your body may have been able to fight it off. So you need to go get tested. If you've been with anybody outside of your marriage relationship, or if you're not married and you've been with anybody that you don't know, you need to go get tested. Because it is affecting our community more than it's affecting any other community. And some people may get mad because I'm telling the people in my congregation to get tested. I'm telling you this because I love you. Because I don't want you to be another statistic. That's what I'm talking about. That's the only reason why I'm talking about this. Is because I don't want you to be another statistic. Okay? And so once again, next week when we talk about this, we're going to talk about how do we break this cycle? How do we get out of it? How do we come out of this? And I just feel led to do the same thing I did last week. And I appreciate your questions. I want to ask you, are there any questions before we close it down? I had some really good questions last week. Yes, sir.
So about Father Said, what book were you reading again?
The book, and this book literally changed my life. And I'll tell you how it changed my life next week. It literally changed my life. It's called The Smell Book. The Smell Book. By a woman named Ruth Winter. I The name of the book is Smell Book, Sense, Sex, and Society. All right. And so she talks about how the scent of a man affects the development of a child. And she goes on to say how when a child has not received their father's scent, if it's a female, what will happen is she will either become repulsed by the scent of the man, or she will begin to hunger for his scent. And so if she begins to be repulsed by the scent of a man, then she becomes more partial to women. And that's why statistics now say that 15% of women have said that they've had sexual relationships with another woman within the last 12 months. There's another book out there, I can't remember the author's name, called The Scent of Eros. The Scent of Eros. Eros means erotic love. Okay, it's a Greek word. So you can find that book too. I forget the author's name, but you can Google it. Any other questions? Velvet had a question she asked me, and I can't remember how you asked it. Can you ask it again?
When I sent you the email?
Yeah.
Because it's been said mainly by women, and some of them said that I've heard. When you just can't help who you love or who you fall in love with.
Okay.
And I just can't help it, I just love them. Even though you know that person may not be good for you, flat out not good for you. You just can't help who you fall in love with. Is love, being in love, a choice or not?
Depends on what context of love you're talking about. Okay. Being in love is a choice. You can choose who you fall in love with, because the Bible says he who finds a wife finds a good thing. So that means that God ain't setting up soulmates. You know, God's not going out choosing our spouse saying, okay, this is the one for you. No, we choose who we hook up with. All right. Now, one of the things that I've learned in doing my research is that the heart and the brain are really synchronized. And in the brain, when I begin to get connected to an individual, those same memories that are stored in my brain are stored in my heart in what's called a heart brain. It's new science out now. And so what happens is now my heart begins to send out the same signals or receive the same signals that my brain is receiving. And it is so profound that it talks about how you can come into contact with an individual and you can sense their presence even before you lay eyes on them or they touch you. All right. Now, if this is the case, that means that I can know somebody is around me. Now, couple that with this. In the smell book, it talked about how when those pheromones are released airborne, that they are so significant that a man can get an erection on one side of a room in a club, in a crowded atmosphere, and it goes into the nostrils of a woman on a whole other side of the room, and their eyes begin to meet. That's why you have that love at first sight thing. This is a trip, man. You know, and their eyes will meet. They're on two opposite sides of the room. They never met each other before. Now, what happens is, now if I don't have, if I have an emotional hole or depravity, what my heart would do is my heart would say, "Hey, you just fell in love." You know, and so you go hard after them, and then if you have the sexual intercourse, it begins to heighten that. And so now your nose is wide open simply because you had this experience. All of this has all transpired. And so we think that, you know, we don't have a choice of who we love, but we have a choice. But it's important that we listen to our head and not our heart. Okay? And we have to ask ourselves logical questions. Like, has he been to jail before? What's the credit score like? You know, is he a drug addict? Is she a drug addict? Are they alcoholic? What kind of family they come from? You know, you have to ask yourself all these questions.